Welcome to the Habitat Conservation Fund Anadromous Salmonids and Trout Habitat Tutorial video. This category is for acquisition, enhancement, or restoration of aquatic habitat for spawning and rearing of anadromous salmonids and trout. That is, fish which spend most of their adult lives in salt water and migrate to freshwater rivers and lakes to reproduce. Let's begin reviewing the Anadromous Salmonids and Trout Habitat Application Guide. Let's view the table of contents on page 3. Please note that all words and terms in caps are defined in the back of this application guide, beginning on page 45. Now we are viewing the Habitat Conservation Fund, referred to as HCF category chart, which identifies each of the 7 categories, including eligible funding types, cost types, species impact, and project examples. The anadromous salmonids and trout habitat category data is in the top right column. A few examples of eligible projects in this category may include the creation of spawning areas for salmon and trout, or removing invasive plant species to improve anadromous and trout habitat. Since we've already reviewed the overall intent of this program at the beginning of this video, let's move to page 6 to view the program overview. The HCF program allocates approximately $2 million per year to the California Department of Parks and Recreation. Please refer to the HCF webpage for the current amount available for this current application cycle. Please disregard the information about delivering or sending applications to OGALs. All applications must be submitted online. Visit the HCF webpage for application filing deadline information, as well as the link to submit the online application. Submit the application online before 5 p.m. Any applications submitted to our online portal after 5 p.m. will not be accepted. The grant performance period for each project is 5 years, starting on July 1st of the fiscal year, following the application due date, based on final enactment of the state budget. Please refer to the HCF webpage for the grant performance period dates. For the minimum and maximum grant request amounts, we'll talk about that now. Although the current guide notes grant requests typically should not exceed $200,000, grant requests of $1 million to $2 million are encouraged for this round. However, there is no set minimum grant amount. Please request the amount needed up to $2 million to complete the project. Projects in all categories compete for the funding available. There is no designated amount set aside for a particular category. HCF does require match funds. Match requirement will be reviewed later in greater detail. However, please be aware of 2 key points. Number 1, there is a required non-state dollar-for-dollar match, and number 2, the match must be spent on eligible costs under the program.
Next, let's move to page 7 to view the eligible applicants. Eligible applicants include cities, counties, or districts. See the definition of districts on page 46 of this application guide to ensure that your district is an eligible applicant. Please note that nonprofit organizations and state and federal agencies are not eligible applicants for the HCF program. Eligible applicants. Please refer to the Habitat Conservation Fund category chart we reviewed earlier in order to view the examples of eligible project types. Ineligible projects. In the middle of page 7 is a list of ineligible projects such as projects arising from a mitigation ruling affecting another location are not eligible. Please review the specific list of ineligible projects to ensure that your proposal will be eligible. Next, let's move to page 9 to review the application process. There is no limit to the number of applications an applicant can submit. Each project site must have its own application. An application cannot include more than one category. At a minimum, the project selection criteria must be submitted by the application deadline. No revisions to the project criteria will be accepted after this date. For the remainder of the application checklist documents, such as site plans and CEQA, we can work with you after the application deadline to complete. Now, let's proceed to page 10 to review the application packet checklist. Only submit items listed in the application checklist. Do not submit additional items such as letters of support. We understand the work that it takes to get these letters. Instead, focus on planning your project. All projects are reviewed based on the merits of the project using the project selection criteria only. Now, let's move to page 12 to review the application form. A fillable version is located on the HCF website. Complete all applicable fields on this form, including the approximate number of acres of the project site. Have this form signed by the applicant's authorized representative.
Let's proceed to page 14 to view the authorizing resolution form. Resolutions indicate your governing body supports the project and designates an authorized representative position who will sign forms in the application package. Please use language provided in the template. Please note number 5. The resolution requires a designated position, for example, a manager, director, etc., not a person's name. This position will also be responsible for signing payment requests if awarded. Therefore, if a specific person is identified and that person moves to a new position, additional paperwork will be required to designate a new authorized representative. This is why designating a position title rather than a person is important. The authorizing resolution is a common example of a checklist item that may need extra time to complete, and that is acceptable. Include a placeholder and a time frame of when the resolution will be adopted. Now let's turn to page 15, where we will view the instructions for both the grant scope cost estimate form and the match requirement. This form will be used to establish the expected grant deliverables. All the recreation features and major support amenities listed on this form must be completed and open to the public before final grant payment is approved. This is what our office, auditors, and the public will expect to see upon final grant payment. Let's move to the middle of this page to view directions for establishing the grant scope. This category allows for acquisition projects or development, such as enhancement and restoration. Therefore, phrases may be used such as acquire, enhance, or restore to describe the type of work for each recreation feature and/or major support amenity. If interpretive signage would be part of the grant scope, it must be included on the grant scope cost estimate form regardless of cost. Next, let's review the information in the middle of page 16 within the box. If the cost of an item is less than $30,000, it is a minor support amenity, such as benches. Please fold in minor support amenities and contingency costs into the related recreation feature or major support amenity, and not as a stand-alone item. Don't list future phases beyond what will be completed with the grant plus match requirement.
Next, we'll move to the bottom of page 17 to review the match instructions. As previously mentioned, this program requires a dollar-for-dollar match. Match must be committed at the time of application. Future fundraising is not considered committed. At the bottom of page 17 and the top of page 18 are eligible match sources. Eligible match sources include local funds, local general funds, and local bond funds, private funds, donated materials and services, value of donated land for acquisition projects only, federal funds, and other state funds are ineligible as match sources. Moving further down to page 18, the rules regarding match are the following. Match can only be spent on eligible costs, as the same rules apply to both grant requests plus match. The grant and the required match amounts combined cannot pay for more than 25% of pre-construction costs of the total HCF project. These costs, such as plans, construction documents, permits, etc., we'll cover the complete list in a few minutes. At the bottom of this page, there is an example of how to calculate the match amount of your project. Moving on to page 19, let's review the actual grant scope cost estimate form. Please use the applicable phrases as previously discussed, such as acquire, enhance, or restore, to write your scope on this form and the associated costs. Remember, do not list contingency costs as a separate line item, but fold them into the related feature. Indicate the HCF grant and required match costs, which will equal the estimated total project cost. The total project costs listed here on the grant scope cost estimate form must be consistent with the estimated total project costs listed on the application form. All figures need to be rounded to the nearest whole dollar. Below the chart is where you'll indicate the match sources, amounts, and the date committed.
Let's go to page 41 to view the eligible cost chart. The eligible costs for this category are listed on pages 41 through 43. We encourage you to review these charts while developing your project proposal. Keep in mind the grant performance period for each project is 5 years. Costs are not eligible outside of these dates. The target date is to complete the project and submit final documents to our office by the last working date of March, prior to the end of the grant performance period. Traveling down to page 44, we are now seeing the ineligible cost chart. And here we are. Please review this list and remember that these ineligible costs cannot be charged to the grant, including indirect costs, grant writing, and costs incurred prior to the start of the grant performance period. Next, let's jump back up to page 20 for information on land tenure. If the project site is owned in fee simple by the applicant will submit the ownership documents, such as a deed or deed recordation number, indicating the applicant has title to the property. Let's now move to page 22. And here we are to discuss if the applicant does not own the land. If the applicant does not own the land, the applicant will provide an agreement between the applicant and the landowner that, at a minimum, addresses all the elements of this land tenure form. Please note the term of the agreement is either 10 years or 20 years, depending on if the grant amount is up to $100,000 or over $100,000. Include the completed land tenure form along with the agreement. If the land tenure agreement is a draft at the time of application, follow the instructions at the bottom of page 20 and on to the top of page 21. Now, we will proceed to page 24 to view the CEQA compliance certification form. CEQA instructions are located on page 23 and outlines the two required items. The first is the form on page 24, which is the CEQA compliance certification. The first is either a notice of exemption or notice of determination filed with and stamped by the county clerk. Please ensure that the project description on the notice of exemption or notice of determination covers the elements described in the grant scope. No further CEQA analysis should be needed if the grant is awarded. If CEQA is not completed by the application deadline, then it's encouraged to complete and submit CEQA within 60 days after the application deadline.
Let's move to page 25. The project completion schedule. Please provide a project completion schedule that includes the proposed project key milestones. Next is the site plan. A site plan is required for development projects. Please upload a drawing or depiction indicating the scale, project orientation with the north arrow, and where the proposed improvements will be located. The plan should also indicate access points to the site and location of any interpretive signs. Next is the topographic map. Please provide a topographic map that indicates the proposed project's parcel's location. Please depict the project in relation to the wildlife corridors or wildlife resources such as vegetated area, creeks, and other features including archaeological sites, existing roads and trails. We provided a link to the USGS topographic maps on the HCF website under additional application resources. Next is the project location map. Please provide a map with the city or county showing highways and street access to the project site, and with enough detail to allow a person unfamiliar with the area to locate the project. The next two items are applicable only to acquisition projects, starting with the acquisition schedule. The instructions are located on page 25. However, we are going to view the actual acquisition schedule form on page 26. The acquisition schedule form, we request that you fill out the acquisition schedule form outlining the acreage and parcel numbers to be acquired, estimated acquisition date, and estimated value of each parcel to be acquired. Further instruction is below this chart with the information to include. Now, let's proceed to page 27 to discuss the final checklist item for acquisition projects. A county assessor parcel map and willing seller letter. Please provide a county assessor's parcel map showing the parcels to be acquired through fee simple or a permanent easement. The parcel numbers reflected on the map must match those listed on the acquisition schedule. Also, provide a willing seller letter from the landowner. This letter does not need to include legally binding language. A simple statement showing that the seller is willing to sell should the grant be awarded is acceptable. If the project is to acquire a permanent easement, please submit a copy of the proposed easement language for our review. Permanent easement agreements must guarantee the authority to use the property for the purpose specified in this application.
Let's now move to the project summary. Provide a one-page summary that describes the proposed project. The summary will not be scored. The project proposal. This includes all responses to the project selection criteria questions that we'll review in detail shortly. Staying on this page, let's move down to lease or agreements. Please provide a list of all leases, agreements, etc., affecting project lands or the operation and maintenance, excluding those relevant to land tenure, if applicable. Required regulatory permits. Please provide a list of existing and additional required permits, the status of each, and indicate when permit approval is expected. Examples include Fish and Game permits and/or Army Corps of Engineers. Next is land management plan for project lands previously acquired with HCF funds. If proposing a project on land that was previously acquired with HCF funds, describe the management plan that should include efforts to reasonably reduce possible conflicts with neighboring land use and landowner. Moving to page 28, we encounter photos of project site. Upload photos of the project site sufficient to show the area or areas to be acquired, enhanced, restored, or developed with a caption to describe and identify each photo. The final checklist item for development, enhancement, or restoration projects is the Conservation Corps involvement process. For these types of projects, Conservation Corps involvement is encouraged to the extent achievable. The applicant is required to contact both the California Conservation Corps and the local certified Conservation Corps to obtain feedback on whether either can participate in the project. You'll see as we progress to the project selection criteria how points will be awarded for projects that use the Corps' services. Now, let's look at the Conservation Corps document on page 29. An updated consultation form is available at the additional application resources link on the HCF webpage. Be sure to send one form to each contact. Also, upload both response forms in the online application portal.
Now let's proceed to project selection criteria on page 30. There is a total of 100 possible points. Everyone starts with 0. Points can only be gained. At the bottom of this page, you'll see the overview of the criteria and the associated point values. Each criteria is followed by a descriptive rubric identifying the range of points to be gained. Let's begin with criteria 1 on page 31. Threat is criteria number 1. The applicant will describe any existing or potential harm or danger to the project site, an overall consequence if the proposed project cannot occur. Maximum points will be awarded to projects where a significant threat to the project site and/or targeted species exists. 10 to 16 points will be awarded to where there is moderate threat, and 5 to 1 points where there is minimum threat. Next, let's move to criteria 2 on page 32, which is for site access. Per this program's legislation, the public should have access to the project site, except when access may interfere with habitat protection. Applicants will describe plans for public access by the time of project completion by providing details on items A through E. A, responsible entrance fees, parking fees, membership fees, activity fees, or no fees. B, on-site or close-by parking. C, easily available public transportation, bike lanes or trails. Or D, flexible hours and hours that accommodate target audiences. And E, which is solutions to any physical, financial, and/or cultural barriers, obstacles to the project site. For acquisition projects, applicants will respond and be scored based on the planned future user access. Viewing the rubric below, you'll see that if the project site is accessible via all 5 items, then 10 points will be awarded. Now let's go to criteria 3 on page 33, which is for stakeholders. Here, the applicant will describe the efforts to involve interested parties within the last 2 years, such as community-based stakeholders, nonprofit partners, or other public agency partners in the planning and/or implementation. And the response include the A, methods used to notify parties of the input opportunity, B, methods used to obtain the interested parties' ideas, and C, how the interested parties' ideas were incorporated in project design and/or implementation. The maximum number of points will be awarded to the applicants who make a concerted effort to involve a broad representation of interested parties in the process.
Criteria number 4 on page 34 is applicant capacity. For acquisition projects, applicants will respond to their knowledge and/or experience of the process to A, identify the appropriate and available property, B, negotiate terms of sale with the landowner, and C, secure the appropriate agency or agents to facilitate escrow transactions. For development, enhancement, or restoration projects, applicants will describe their ability to complete a project as it pertains to A, designing a project to maximize sustainability, B, managing project completion schedule to ensure timely completion of milestones, and C, monitoring project outcomes to ensure they remain as intended. OGALS will also review its own records and consider the applicant's performance history with OGALS as part of the project selection process. This includes reviewing the applicant's ability to complete previous grant-funded projects on time, timely submission of project status reports and payment requests, and to adequately operate and maintain previous grant-funded sites. As you can see in the rubric, at the bottom of this page, applicants that address significant capacity will be awarded maximum points. Criteria number 5 on page 35 is species presence. Here, applicants will describe the presence and variety of species that currently exist at the site. For example, in this Anadromous Salmonids and Trout Habitat Guide, this is specific to identification of the variety and occurrence of the Department of Fish and Wildlife special animals and/or special plants that presently exist on or near the project site. For access to the Department of Fish and Wildlife webpage link, visit the HCF webpage and click on the additional application resources. Additionally, upload a copy of the web link page that identifies the species. A maximum of 10 points will be awarded to Anadromous Salmonids and Trout Habitat Project sites, which have 2 or more targeted species currently on or near the project site.
Let's move to criteria number 6 on page 36, which is for invasive species, plant species. This criteria addresses if invasive plant species exist and are impacting the site. Applicants will describe the current site conditions. For proposed acquisition projects, if the property to be acquired is dominated by native plant species, the maximum 15 points will be awarded. Or, if the project is for enhancement or restoration, applicants will describe how the following activities will be implemented. A, establishment of a local long-term action plan and available funding to continue prevention or control the spread of invasive plant species. B, effective containment efforts. C, evaluation of treatment effectiveness, including the next year's growing season. Applicants that implement all 3 activities will be awarded the maximum 10 points as shown here in the rubric. Let's move on to criteria 7 on page 37. This is for site elements. The ideal habitat for Anadromous salmonids and trout habitat include necessary hydraulical processes to maintain appropriate habitats, which include the influence of human-made structures. Project sites that currently have or will have by completion all 6 elements described in A through F will be awarded 10 points. These elements include A, water quality characteristics suitable for anadromous species, B, level of drainage that maximize water quality, C, regulated use of importation of non-native fish predation, D, unrestricted fish passage both upstream and downstream, E, rifles, runs, pools, and in-stream woody debris, boulders suitable for spawning, and F, levels of monitoring that minimizes pollution and illegal water diversion. Let's move to criteria 8 on page 38. This is for riparian conditions. The ideal anadromous salmonids and trout habitat project includes an optimal site environment on both sides of the stream. Applicants will describe the current conditions on each side of the stream channel. Ideal conditions include A, riparian community composition, B, habitat that extends at least 45 feet on each side of the waterway, C, multi-storied habitat, D, adjacent land that uses and minimizes the risk to the project site. Project sites that include all 4 elements will receive the maximum 10 points.
Criteria number 9 on page 39 is conservation plan. A project that satisfies a high priority need and is discussed in detail in one or more adopted plan, such as a natural community conservation plan or habitat conservation plan, or a riparian bird conservation plan, watershed plan, Bay Delta ecosystem restoration program plan, etc., will receive the maximum 5 points. Criteria number 10 on page 40 is Conservation Corps involvement and is the final criteria. This criteria is only applicable for development, enhancement, or restoration projects. Applicants who contact both the California Conservation Corps and the local Conservation Corps and provide the completed response forms for both organizations will receive 5 points. If the Corps declines, but the applicant went through the consultation process, 5 points will still be awarded. If the Corps states that it is feasible to work on the project, but the applicant declines, full points will not be awarded. Since we've already reviewed the ineligible and eligible costs on pages 41 to 44, we'll move to the program definitions beginning on page 45. During our review of the table of contents, this list of program definitions was mentioned. Remember that all words and terms in caps are defined here. Please use this list to familiarize yourself with this program's definitions. This concludes the Anadromous salmonids and trout habitat tutorial video. Thank you for listening.